So, welcome everyone to the BC Refugee Hub webinar. The title of this session is the Refugee Claim Process. My name is Bahar Taheri. I'm project consultant with the BC Refugee Hub, and I will be guiding us through today's session. I'm joining you from the unceded traditional territory of the Coquitlam First Nation, which lies within the shared territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Musqueam, Cookite, Squamish, and Stolo nations. It's important for me to acknowledge the lands that I'm privileged to live, work, and raise my children on as a way of showing respect and honoring the Indigenous peoples of these lands. Acknowledgement for me is a simple way of resisting the erasure of Indigenous histories and working towards honoring and inviting the truth. ISS of BC's BC Refugee Hub would like to gratefully acknowledge the funding for this project from the province of British Columbia through the Ministry of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills. I'd now like to introduce you to the BC Refugee Hub. For those of you who are maybe newer and not as familiar, so the BC Refugee Hub started in 2015 with the arrival of Syrian refugee families and to assist and empower individuals and refugee serving organizations to help in the resettlement process. ISSOBC, in partnership with the province of British Columbia, created this online resource hub called the BC Refugee Hub. The hub provides users information about refugee arrivals in British Columbia, the latest reports, publications, statistics, fact sheets, and we have a resource center with a variety of information from service providers as well. We highlight stories of refugees and refugee claimants with lived experience through short videos and storytelling. We also provide capacity building online and in-person sessions. So we have webinar training sessions, and we also have in-person sessions related to refugees and refugee claimants. Currently, our focus is on supporting refugee claimants and those working with refugee claimants directly through our resource center and publications and fact sheets. We also promote the services and programs of various organizations across British Columbia in our weekly updates and on the website in our monthly e-newsletter. So for this year, we've completed a service directory of BC Safe Haven service providers. Currently, we have our second edition out. It's updated every quarter. So we'll have another edition out by the end of this month, hopefully, with even more updated contact information for service providers across British Columbia. We also have put out a toolkit, an online toolkit on the refugee claim process. You can also find that on the hub, and I'll post the link in the chat box shortly. And we've also completed 3 webinars this year, and this is our 4th one, and we have the recordings available for the first 3 on the hub. So if you'd like to go back and view those, I'll also put the link to those in the chat box. We'll also be releasing 2 fact sheets shortly, probably later today on the hub. And then we've also done mental health trainings in each of the regions. We've done this in partnership with FAST, and we've done the in-person trainings, and we will shortly be coming out with an e-learning and toolkit on that content as well. And we've done an environmental scan with a report on understanding the needs of refugee claimants. And this is meant to inform our activities for next year as we'll be holding a BC Refugee Hub Mental Health Forum. And finally, we have a service map of BC Safe Haven funded organizations. That's also on the hub right now. And that's all of these resources are to help with referrals and supports to kind of like have a space where all of the contact information is there. So if you do need to refer your clients. So this is the service directory which I've mentioned. I'll put the link in the chat box for everyone to access if you haven't already. And we have weekly and monthly activities. So we have our monthly e-newsletters. Weekly, we post on the hub with new programs, events, resources. We also participate in regular planning and collaboration meetings with our partners, including VAST, MapBC, AMSA, and we're part of AMSA's working groups. And this is also we can stay informed about what's going on in different parts of BC and what service providers are looking for in terms of training and resources. So if you would like anything featured on our newsletter or the hub, please email me at refugeehub@issbc.org. Thanks. Okay, so I would now like to introduce Kieran Davis, Program Specialist, BC Safe Haven Resource Network, to provide an overview of the BC Safe Haven Resource Network led by AMSA.
Thanks, Bahar. I'd like to start off with a brief land acknowledgement. As a provincial umbrella association, AMSA acknowledges that BC is on the unceded homelands of First Nations who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. We recognize the privilege that we have as settlers on this land and acknowledge that AMSA's operations are on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. As an organization, AMSA is committed to creating a safe space for Indigenous voices. And just briefly on the BC Safe Haven Resource Network, it provides key supports to refugee claimants and other humanitarian and vulnerable newcomers through the Safe Haven program. The resource network itself is a collaboration and partnership focused program supporting direct service providers through targeted capacity building activities, many of which Bahar highlighted for us already. This collaboration includes multiple partner organizations who play a key role creating resources for those direct service providers. And on the next slide, we can see the 4 streams that are part of the BC Safe Haven Resource Network and the partners who play essential roles in the resource creation process. So the collaboration and partnership focused program includes capacity building activities such as webinars like this one, fact sheets, many other resources, as well as supporting organizations to develop humanitarian movement plans. And that involves working closely with the BC Refugee Hub as well as the multi-agency partnership of British Columbia or MAP BC. Our mental health activities include in-person workshops, e-learnings, information sessions, and a phone line for frontline service providers to call and receive support with respect to the mental health of their refugee claimant clients. And I will post the information for that phone line in the chat as well. Our language activities involve consultation with Safe Haven contract organizations to create an English language curriculum specifically for Safe Haven clients and English language classes that include refugee claimants. And finally, our public support gathering arm is engaged through ACES, AMSA's charitable arm, in partnership with United Way BC to build community support for refugee claimants, including public awareness, donations and volunteer management, and other community-based supports. I just want to remind folks on this next slide, we have the links. Please connect with AMSA on LinkedIn, Facebook, and X, formerly Twitter. And feel free to visit our website at www.amsa.org for many resources, e-learnings, and recent reports. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kieran. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. Sophia Underhill works at Kinbrace Community Society as the Refugee Protection Lead. Her role entails increasing access to justice for refugee claimants and coordinating the organization's Ready Tour program and public legal education resources. Prior to starting at Kinbrace, Sophia was living in London, England, where she worked with individuals affected by the immigration detention and criminal justice systems and with unaccompanied minors arriving in the UK. Sophia has experience working with UNHCR in India and overseeing community-based research in the refugee settlement sector. Sophia also acts as a designated representative for the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada in her spare time. Sophia holds a BA in International Studies from Simon Fraser University and a master's in human rights from the London School of Economics. Over to you, Sophia.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, Bahar. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this webinar. I'm really excited to be here today. I am in East Vancouver right now, so also joining from the unceded territory Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. But the program that I run is a national program, so that's kind of the persona and that I'm coming to speak to you from today. So even though I work at Kinbrace, this is kind of a national education program that we're going to talk through today. So on the next slide, you'll see a short outline. So I'm going to provide an introduction to the My Refugee Claim resources, which are the public legal education information resources that Kinbrace has created. Then I'm going to walk through the refugee claim process, keep it high level, but detailed enough that you get a good sense of it, I think. I will highlight some additional resources for all of you specific to the refugee claim process, and then we can do questions. So on the next slide, you'll see a little overview explainer of what My Refugee Claim is. So as I said, these are public legal education information resources. They're written for refugee claimants, but of great benefit, I think, to service providers. And what they really try to do is to help explain the refugee claim process in clear, understandable language. So there's a few different types of resources in this umbrella of My Refugee Claim, which I'm going to talk to in a moment. And so why did we create My Refugee Claim? Really because the refugee claim process is complicated, it's onerous for claimants and stressful, and pretty difficult to navigate due to the complexity. So that's the why. So the first resource that I want to highlight is myrefugeeclaim.ca. Rather, it's a website. And what this website is designed to do is to provide a really detailed kind of explainer of the entire refugee claim process from start to finish. The entire website had a plain language edit done to it so that it retains the kind of the legal detail that it needs to, but it's written at a really basic level. It's extremely visual to make sure that you know when you're on this website, you're not on a government website. This is something for refugee claimants. We created this a few years ago with a whole host of input from service providers, really from coast to coast. So we knew that we needed to kind of bring in people from all across the country, so we did. And all of that content was legally vetted by a team of lawyers from across the country. And any update that we do to the website gets a legal content review. So, and yeah, one other thing about the website is that we were really intentional when we created this, that we wanted the target audience to be, so we wanted to write to refugee claimants. And so that is the tone, that is the underlying purpose of this resource. However, we know from a lot of feedback that we've received that this resource is really helpful to service providers and settlement workers. Lawyers use it. So it is obviously multi-purpose, but I think the resource benefits from writing to claimants directly. And then our website has sort of 4 key commitments. We want it to always be relevant. We want it to be accessible. We want it to be personal, and it needs to be collaborative. So the information on our website is obviously as accurate and up to date as possible. We regularly review the content. Sometimes it's more up to date than the IRB website, but do keep in mind that each claimant's process looks a little different and policies are always shifting. So just something to keep in mind. This is the menu for the website, and it shows you how the content is broken down. So it has all of these different sections, and if you click into each of these sections, there's subsections, and just like tons and tons and tons of information. So this is the broad layout. You can see the kind of visual design. I definitely encourage you to click around in it. And at the end of the presentation, I'll do a little highlight reel. I'll share my screen and go through kind of what I think are maybe some of the most helpful parts of the website. excitingly, in the fall of last year, we added a whole bunch of languages to the website. So now the entire website is in 13 languages. You can see the list of languages here. This was really one of our key commitments when we started this program, was that we wanted it to be entirely multilingual. And yeah, so we did some research. These were the languages nationally that would help us to reach the highest number of refugee claimants in a language they speak. But we're intending to add to it one language at least every year. So yeah, I know we can't always get every language on there, but this is this list for now. And one other thing I just wanted to add about the website is that we also added a text-to-speech function, so you can listen to the whole website in any of the languages. And that's really obviously for people who have visual impairment, but also for people with low literacy levels. So then the second resource that we created was a print resource. It's a 25-page booklet. It's called the orientation booklet. It provides a really high-level overview of the claim process, so not as detailed as the website. And you can download it in PDF, like it's a PDF on our website that you can download. You can print it from your office. It's quite easy. And it's kind of meant to be used like almost like a workbook. It's got lots of checklists and boxes where claimants can write in, important dates and things like that. So these are a few examples of the pages in the orientation booklet. So you can kind of see how they look. On the left is kind of a breakdown of the government agencies involved in claims. On the right, this is like the legal issues that come up in a claim and how they can show evidence for each of these issues. And then on the next page, there is a checklist of what claimants can do to help them feel prepared throughout their claim process. Another example is a page where it talks about the next steps after receiving a decision, and especially if you get a negative decision, what are kind of some of the steps that you can take. So that just to show you what the kind of inside of the booklet looks like. And then on the next page, I just wanted to highlight that Kinbrace has a grant right now that allows us to print and ship physical copies of the orientation booklets and little brochures about our resources to any organization that feels that they would benefit from them for their clients. And these are also available in any of those 13 languages that I showed above, free to you. And so there's a order form that you can click if you want to order some copies, or the QR code also works. And I just wanted to say that we're actually going to be hopefully reviewing the orders and sending them to the printer next week. So if you're interested, you could do this week. That would be, helpful. I'm going to talk about the third part of our My Refugee Claim program, which is called Ready Tours. So these are online workshops for refugee claimants and service providers. There's two different kinds of sessions. One is a hearing ready tour, the other an appeal ready tour. I'll talk about those in a second. But I just want to say, while also this workshop is kind of geared towards claimants, it's a great training tool for settlement workers as well. And we have kind of service providers or settlement workers attend every single session that we have. So really encourage you to attend one if you haven't, or if you haven't for a while, just to get a sense. And then that helps you also to talk about it if you want to recommend this session to any clients that you know would benefit. These sessions are done in partnership with the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada. So they deliver the content and answer questions. We facilitate and handle all the registration. They're online on Microsoft Teams, And if anyone needs an interpreter, we also provide that free of charge. So hearing ready tours, these were the first session we ever created back in 2008. They started as a small group of people who kind of traveled from Kinbrace to the IRB building downtown to get a look at the hearing room because they couldn't picture what it would be like. And so that was kind of the origin of these sessions. They are done, the presentation is delivered by the Refugee Protection Division of the Immigration Refugee Board. So this is the division that handles all refugee claims. And there's sort of 4 components of these presentations. So they talk through making a refugee claim, preparing for the hearing, what happens on the hearing day and who's there, and what happens after the hearing. And so people who attend kind of learn all about the kind of evidence that they can submit to support their claim. They learn about like how and like exactly when to submit evidence. They learn all about the different kind of people that will be at their hearing and what their roles are. And as well as like the order of events on the hearing day. So what actually happens during a hearing. And then they talk through like the main legal issues that are addressed during the hearing that they can expect to receive questions on and how the decision is rendered. So that's kind of the content of that session. They're about 2 hours online. On the next page is the information about the appeal ready tours. So these are done in partnership with the Refugee Appeal Division of the IRB. So this is the division that manages appeals or makes decisions on appeals. So the kind of main components of the session are you learn how to prepare and submit an appeal in case of a negative decision. You get a sense of the deadlines, which are really tight. The initial deadline is 15 days from your negative decision. So that's really important and empowering information. And then participants also learn which forms need to be completed to file an appeal. So it's a 2-part process, notice of appeal, and then your appellant's record. So they learn all about that. And who are the people that attend this session? It's open to refugee claimants, so people who haven't yet had their hearing or decision. It's open obviously to appellants who are individuals who've received a negative decision and are wanting to appeal or in the appeal process, and service providers. So all these people encouraged to attend to kind of have the information about how to make an appeal in case that is needed. So this is just a screenshot of our website. So to register for Ready Tours, it's all done through our website, the My Refugee Claim website. And you can just like click register now, and then you submit a small registration form. You can see the dates below. So there's English only sessions, there's French only sessions, and then there's multilingual sessions. So these are just sessions that allow for an interpreter. I'm just going to transition now to talking about the refugee claim process. And before I do that, I want to explain why you should have an understanding of the refugee claim process, or what's your role in understanding this process. I guess the obvious one is if you work with claimants, they're going to ask you what their documents are and papers are from the IRCC, CBSA, and IRB, and what it all means. So you're probably going to be asked questions about it. But also, it allows you to really have an understanding of what claimants must go through. It is a complex legal process with multiple components and areas of law. It's also rigorous. It's a rigorous process for claimants. So they have to prepare a lot of documents. These documents must contain excruciating detail. They have to prepare themselves for a hearing, which is extremely nerve-wracking. They have to testify at the hearing. They have to answer questions. They have to meet with and speak with their lawyer over and over about their claim, and they'll be asked tons and tons of small details. And obviously, this process is, potentially detrimental for the mental health of claimants. So it's just important for you to understand what they navigate through. This process is happening alongside all the other important settlement needs that I imagine all of you work with every day. And so the work of doing the refugee claim can sometimes feel out of sight, out of mind, when you're trying to deal with really dire things like housing and food insecurity and employment and all these other things. But just to know that this is also part of the process. This is happening in tandem, and claimants will have to spend time preparing when they're able and throughout this process. Also, it's just worth remembering that the refugee decision is really what determines whether claimants can remain in Canada or whether they must leave or try to find another way to remain. So it's really important. And the last thing I just wanted to mention is that our role, your role, my role, is to provide legal information, but never legal advice, unless you're a lawyer. And the difference is that legal information is general. So it's kind of like, this is how the process works, or this is what this paper is. But legal advice is tailored specifically to the person's situation. So this is what you should do. There is a lot of misunderstanding about what exactly claimants are supposed to be doing when they make a refugee claim, or in other words, what the refugee definition is. So I'm going to start here with some basics around definition, because it's really important to have an understanding of this foundational concept before you talk about anything else. So making a refugee claim in Canada is a process of demonstrating that the following 6 things are all true for you. So the first is, if I return to my country, I will likely be treated very badly. And this is some plain language explanation. So this is just you have to demonstrate risk of harm or persecution if you return. Point 2, I would be treated badly because of who I am or what I believe. To be successful in your refugee claim here in Canada, you have to actually demonstrate that this risk that you face in your country is personal to you, that it's not something that everybody else in your country also faces. And you have to tie that to your identity in one of 5 categories: your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, or your social group. So it has to be personalized. Now, point 3, I am honestly scared to return. You have to demonstrate that there's a subjective element of fear, and the IRB will assess this. Point 4, I have good reason to be scared to live in my country. Your fear has to be based in, has to have an objective basis. So they're going to look at what are conditions like in your country? How do people with your specific profile usually get treated in your country? Things like that, objective kind of fact. Point 5 is, my government cannot protect me. So you have to show that your government is unable or unwilling to protect you, and that you can't live safely or reasonably in another part of your country. So that's called internal flight alternative. So just to say that when you make a refugee claim, the IRB will be assessing if you meet all 6 of these points. Okay? And this may not be something that a claimant necessarily understands, but if they have a lawyer, this is what the lawyer will be trying to cover. And this is really what will be sort of drawn out throughout the process. Okay, Also, refugee claimants have to deal with 3 different government agencies. So there's the Canada Border Services Agency, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, and the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada. So I'm going to explain the role that these agencies play throughout the rest of the presentation. But the key point here is that there are 3 separate agencies that all handle different parts of the claim process. And they don't always communicate with each other well. So that can be kind of confusing and challenging for claimants to understand and navigate. If IRCC has your correct address, they're not going to share that with the IRB. You also need to tell the IRB, things like that. So it's a tangled web, and I just want you to understand that at the beginning here. Okay, the next slide shows the basic steps in the refugee claim journey. Step 1, you prepare your claim. Step 2, you submit your claim. Step 3, you must undergo an eligibility process. And just to say, okay, now I'll talk about that later. Step 4 is you will have your biometrics taken at some point, fingerprints and photos. Step 5 is all claimants have to have an immigration medical exam done. Step 6 is your claim will be referred by either CBSA or IRCC, whoever handled the beginning of your claim, to the Immigration and Refugee Board for processing. Step 7 is preparing your evidence and all your paperwork. Step 8 is getting all of your evidence translated if it's not in English or French already, and submitted to the IRB. Step 9, you attend your IRB refugee hearing, and step 10, you receive your decision. On the next slide, I'm going to cover, there's 2 ways of making your claim or of starting your claim. So the first method is a port of entry claim, is what it's called. So this is a claim made directly upon entry to Canada at either an airport, international airport, an official land border crossing, or a seaport, whatever those are. And it's CBSA, the Canada Border Services Agency, that processes all port of entry claims, all claims made at a port of entry. So CBSA may ask questions. They will ask you questions. They may help you fill out some of the paperwork. They may fingerprint you. They may actually determine your eligibility to make a claim right there and then, or they may allow you to enter, and your eligibility will be determined at a later stage. But you submit your claim to CBSA. And just to note that CBSA also processes any refugee claims that are made in a detention center, even though those aren't technically port of entry claims, but they also handle detention. So thus they handle refugee claims made in detention. The other way that you can make a claim is called an inland claim. It just means that this is a claim made from within Canada. So the way you make an inland claim is by submitting your claim to IRCC in an online application made by through something called the IRCC portal. So this means that all your forms, your basis of claim, and all your other kind of main immigration forms are submitted together online. Your eligibility will then, your eligibility to make a claim will then be determined after the submission of the claim. This is probably like one of the more technical things I'm going to explain. I apologize, but I feel like it's really important to understand. So there is an agreement in place at the time being, who knows what the future holds, but between Canada and the United States that says that individuals should make a refugee claim in the first safe country they enter. And basically, what this means for claimants is that it's quite hard to submit a refugee claim in Canada for anyone who is traveling from the US via the land border. Okay. This agreement generally does not apply to people who arrive by airplane from the US because you must have a visa or be permitted to enter. So it just kind of, this is for land border crossings, okay? We all know lots of people, I'm sure, who have made this journey from another country and then up via the US to Canada. So what this means is that you can only make a refugee claim. So if you come to the port of entry, an official land border crossing, you can only make a refugee claim if you meet a safe third country agreement exception. Okay, and so some of the exceptions are things like you have a family member in Canada, you have a valid visa of some kind to enter Canada, you're an unaccompanied minor, and things like that. Okay, the most common one is you've got a family member in Canada. But the thing that I'll mention here is that you have to bring proof if you are going to try to approach the border and try to show that you meet an exception. So if you have family members in Canada, the CBSA will expect you to kind of like be able to prove it with documents. And if you're turned away at the border because you don't meet a safe third country agreement exception, you will likely receive a ban on entry to Canada. I believe it's 1 year, but I could be wrong. So how the safe third country agreement affects inland claims is that there's something called a 14-day rule. If an individual enters Canada through an unofficial entry place, so if they enter irregularly and they make a refugee claim within 14 days, they will likely be returned to the US. And they may also be barred from making a refugee claim in the future. So this means that, practically speaking, people who enter irregularly and want to make a refugee claim have to wait 14 days. And that can be a really precarious position for them to be in, obviously. There's also additional implications, which I won't go into really now, but for instance, you may not be able to appeal a negative decision if you entered via a safe third country agreement exception. So this is something kind of tricky and technical that's quite useful to understand if you're seeing claimants regularly. This is just to briefly talk about obtaining legal counsel. Having competent legal counsel can make a huge difference for the claimant. This is a big challenge. So legal aid is available for refugee claims in BC. You can make an application on over the phone, or I think in person. There's 2 tests that you have to pass. One is a financial means test, so you have to be below a financial threshold, and the second is a merits test. So legal aid will assess the merits of the claim, and they'll want to see that they believe it's strong enough to potentially be successful. Now, what we've all noticed in the community is that this application process has become more and more and more rigorous, and a lot of people are receiving legal aid refusals. So my recommendation is to provide, like, claimants are being asked to provide a lot of detailed information and even evidence as part of a legal aid application, which is problematic, but it is what it is. And legal aid is free. So you don't have to pay the claimant if they're accepted, doesn't have to pay like anything at all. This is different from like Alberta, where legal aid is reduced cost, but not free. One thing for all of us to be aware of and alert for is fraud. Unfortunately, this has been a big problem among lawyers and immigration consultants. So encouraging claimants to maybe check with the professional bodies to make sure that the person is a registered lawyer immigration consultant is really not a bad idea. But also one thing which I think it's useful for us in the community to know is to understand what a lawyer should do, what a lawyer shouldn't do, and what the client should do. And we've got a section on our website about it. And really, I think this is really important as we help people navigate working with a lawyer. As well, it's helpful to understand the role of a lawyer in refugee claims. They can be a huge, huge, huge help in helping you compile and review and translate your evidence, in prepping you for the hearing, in guiding you through your hearing, in providing legal submissions on why your claim should be successful. So that's what they can add. Lawyers obviously can't answer questions for claimants during the hearing, but yeah, so understanding what the role of the lawyer is. So what happens after a claimant submits their claim? So this is what we call the front-end processing. And at this stage, all of this processing is still happening with either IRCC or CBSA. So the IRB is not involved until they receive the claim from IRB and IRCC, or from the IRCC or CBSA. So I just want to say that there is not a lot, or not necessarily a lot of uniformity in the front end of the process. So like this can look different or happen in different order depending on how the person made their claim and other factors. So sometimes it's a bit of a mystery for us, even if we know the process really well. But basically, so after submitting a refugee claim, the following things will happen. The individual will receive an acknowledgement of claim document. This is what allows them to claim health coverage under the interim federal health program. So that's an important document. They will receive an instruction letter about how and when they need to complete their immigration medical exam. And that has to be done with specific IRCC approved doctors. They will at some point complete biometrics. So again, that's fingerprinting and photos. They will submit, or they can submit, a work permit application. And so if they've submitted their claim through the IRCC portal, there's a box you can tick to say, yes, I want a work permit. But if that wasn't ticked, or if they've made a claim another way, they can just submit a work permit application. They also undergo an eligibility determination. And so this is really important to understand that before your claim and the specifics of your claim or the facts of your claim are even assessed, all individuals will go through a separate eligibility process. And this is to determine if you're even eligible to make a refugee claim in Canada. Okay. So this is separate from your refugee decision. This is the decision on whether you can bring a refugee claim in Canada. So people may be found ineligible if they are already a convention refugee in another country, if they made a refugee claim in the United States, the UK, Australia, or New Zealand, if they were already previously told by Canada that they couldn't make a refugee claim, if they made a refugee claim previously in Canada that was withdrawn, abandoned, or rejected, if you've been identified as dangerous or a criminal, or you've broken human rights laws. That's some of the factors that may affect individuals who are found to be ineligible to even make their claim here in Canada. But if someone is found eligible, the next step is that they will receive a confirmation of referral letter. So this means that the claim has been sent by either IRCC or CBSA, whoever handled the front end of their claim, to the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada. So it's now been sent to the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, where it will be processed and decided. and they get a confirmation of referral letter. They will also receive their ID document, which is the Refugee Protection Claimant document. It's often the only form of ID that claimants have that has their photo on it. And they will also receive a removal order. And I wanted to mention this because all claimants receive a removal order in their package of paperwork, or it will be served to them. It can be really intimidating for claimants, but the important thing to know is that this removal order is not enforced at this point. So it's not in effect, but it will come into effect if the claimant receives a negative decision, no appeal is made, they've exhausted their ability to stay in Canada. This removal order comes into effect and they're expected to leave in 30 days. As mentioned, there's a bit of mystery to the order of these things. It depends where you've made your claim and on some other mysterious factors that I don't know. The basis of claim form is the main form that is completed with all the details about why you're making a refugee claim. It's your opportunity to put forward your story, give more details about your refugee claim. It has questions about why you left your home country and why you feel you cannot return. It really is kind of the most important document in the refugee claim part of the process. So it's either submitted through the IRCC portal if you've made an inland claim, or if you made a port of entry claim, you might be told either to send your basis of claim form to the IRB directly within 45 days is often what it is, or you might be told to complete the IRCC portal. Something really important to know is that if there are any inaccuracies or errors on the basis of claim form, they should be corrected or addressed. Part of the reason is that during the hearing, claimants will be asked to put up their hand and swear that the contents of their basis of claim form are accurate, true, and complete. And if they swear that, and then there are inconsistencies or incorrect things on the basis of claim form, they will be asked about that. And the basis of claim form should also be consistent with anything. The details in the basis of claim form should be consistent with anything else that is submitted. Again, it's one of the main documents that the IRB will use to make their decision. And claimants will be asked questions about what they've included in their basis of claim form and potentially what they've not included in their basis claim form during their hearing. What should claimants do while they're waiting for their hearing? There's a lot that they can and should be doing. They can gather evidence. Evidence gathering takes time. They can work on getting their evidence translated into English or French. They can review and look out for any information that doesn't match in their basis of claim form and any other documents that are going to be looked at for their claim. They should make sure that the IRB has their correct address and should inform them if they change address, and should maybe even double check the IRB has their correct address so they don't miss their hearing notice to appear letter, which tells them about their hearing date. They can keep up on the news from their country, and if anything changes that affects their refugee claim, they can let their lawyer know. They can meet with their lawyer, they can contact potential witnesses, they can attend a ready tour. There's lots of things they can do while they're waiting. On the next page, I've anticipated a frequently asked question. How long does it take to get a hearing date? The answer is that it depends and it varies widely. So certain cases are given priority for scheduling. For instance, older cases, so i.e. cases that have been waiting longer than new ones. Also unaccompanied minors, people in detention centers, vulnerable persons, and claims identified as less complex could all be given priority for scheduling. Other factors that can impact wait times is obviously the number of refugee claims waiting to be heard, which is at an all-time high right now. The availability of one's counsel or lawyer. If claimants have a lawyer who's like got hundreds of refugee claims, they might be the ones to say, I can't do the claim right now. So that could impact their wait time. If the claimant's security clearance, which happens with CSIS, I believe, and CBSA is completed, if their case is actually prepared for the hearing. So sometimes what happens is, claimants might get a hearing date, but actually their claim isn't ready. And so they have to ask for more time, which is just a pain. And it also depends on how the IRB streams the claim. So the IRB has internal processes around how they stream various claims, and that'll factor. Usually hearings are scheduled 2 to 4 months in advance. So you'll get a hearing letter, but it may be for May or June. And according to the IRB website, the average is 24 months wait time. I was sitting with a lawyer last week who was explaining this to the client, and he said, I wouldn't be surprised if we got a letter saying your hearing is next month. And I also wouldn't be surprised if we got a letter saying your hearing, like a letter in like a year and a half saying your hearing is coming up. So it's really hard to predict. And claimants often say, my friend who has like the same claim as I did or came in after me got a hearing date. Why haven't I? It could be due to some of these things. Just a note about evidence. So there's a lot of information on our website about this. There's different types of evidence that claimants will be expected to submit as part of their claim. So personal evidence, that's evidence about them. There's country conditions evidence, that's evidence about the way things are in their country, and witness testimony. This will all need to be translated into English or French. You can submit video or audio evidence, but there needs to be like a script provided in the original language and a translation into English or French. The evidence deadline is 10 days before the hearing date. That's 10 calendar days, but really you don't have to wait till the deadline. You can submit evidence at any point, even before your hearing is scheduled. All evidence really should be reviewed by a lawyer if the claimant has one. Sometimes claimants think something is helpful for evidence and maybe it's not. You can submit evidence like within the 10-day deadline, but you need to make an application to submit late disclosure. And evidence can be submitted quite a few different ways: electronically, mail, etc. During the hearing, there are a number of different legal issues that may be addressed, and the questioning could surround any of these legal issues. I've kind of covered a little bit of this when I talked about the refugee definition. So there's a lot more information about this stuff on the website, and I'm not really going to get into it, but the claim could center around any of these things. And claimants should be prepared to kind of address any of these things. This is a screenshot example of our website. On the left, you'll see we go through all of these legal issues, and we provide examples of evidence you could provide to try to substantiate that issue. So for example, if you're trying to prove that you have a genuine reason to fear risk of harm in your home country, you could provide evidence like of police reports, doctor's reports, proof that you tried to escape danger, witness statements, news sources, etc. And there's a lot, so like for every one of those sections, there's examples of evidence on our website. These are some of the hearing tips that are provided on our website. It's a really good idea to have an interpreter, even if you speak some or even decent English or French. You can ask to have an interpreter on standby, which means like if you start to get flustered or it's easier to explain something in your own language, or you want the interpreter to explain something that the member said, you can ask for that, but they don't have to interpret everything. So that's also an option. And the way you request an interpreter is either you fill it out on your basis of claim form, what language of interpretation you need and dialect. If you didn't do that, you can always write to the IRB and ask, and it's just a really good idea. Because if you don't have an interpreter and you decide at your hearing you want one, it likely they'll have to postpone your hearing and it can take a while. So another tip is to have all your documents with you, your basis of claim, any evidence, everything else, but you have to be prepared to speak without referencing your documents. So you're supposed to have your documents there in case you're asked to refer to a specific section, but often you'll be asked to have your table clear and to not look at documents while answering questions. So that's just something that's really good for claimants to know. I think I saw something come into the chat about whether hearings are virtual or in person. All hearings are scheduled as virtual hearings by default, and they would only be an in-person hearing if there was a really specific reason why it would need to be in person. At a virtual hearing, you'll be asked to like swear that you're in a private place that no one can hear or see you, and you may be asked to show that you have nothing on your desk. You should practice answering questions. It's just a good idea. A good lawyer should do this with you before your hearing. You should plan where you're going to be for your hearing and where your children will be. So if you're doing a virtual hearing, you need to make sure that you've got a strong internet connection, you have a webcam, you're in a private and quiet location. If you have children that are under the age of 18, they do not need to attend the hearing. And it's ideal if they can be somewhere else, because it can be distracting to have kids nearby. Also, people are usually talking about things that they don't want their kids to hear. And so, yeah, it just can be a lot easier if children can be at school or with someone else. Don't try to answer questions you don't understand as another tip. And likewise, be honest if you're guessing about like a date or the answer, or if you don't know the answer. It really doesn't serve claimants to try to answer what they think the member will want to hear. All claimants can and should ask for breaks if they need them at any time. If they're feeling emotional or they feel like they can't concentrate, ask for a break. It's totally acceptable. As well as claimants are allowed to ask for specific procedural accommodations if they need it. They should be asked for ahead of time, but a few examples of the kind of accommodations that can be asked for is like if the claimant needs like the hearing to be at a specific time of day, like if they really don't function well in the morning because they're on really strong medication or something, they can ask for an afternoon hearing. They could ask to be allowed more frequent breaks throughout the hearing. They could ask for the questions that they'll be asked to be provided ahead of time, or for there to be a particular order of the questioning, or even for certain topics, like particularly topics that surround like an extremely traumatizing event to be avoided or handled in a specific way. Or they could ask to have a decision maker, a member, and an interpreter of a particular gender. So that might be for individuals who have, for instance, like a sexual or gender violence claim. And obviously the IRB has to accept those accommodations, but you absolutely can ask for them. And the last tip is self-care. So like getting a good sleep, eating well, these things are really important to being able to be present and answer questions well during a hearing. A hearing lasts on average 3 hours. It can be less, can definitely be more, but it's about 3 hours. So how do individuals receive a decision? So the member, who's the decision maker, communicates their decision in one of two ways. So they'll either tell you at the end of your hearing, or they will reserve their decision, which means that they need more time to think about it, and they will provide your decision by letter at some point after the hearing. And then if the decision is positive, claimants can apply for permanent residency. They can apply for something called a refugee travel document if they want to travel. Claimants, even if they get a positive decision, should not travel to their home country because that could be seen by the government as showing that you actually don't have any risk of harm in your country, and you can have your status even taken away. And if their claim is negative, they should seek legal advice if possible. They could file an appeal to the Refugee Appeal Division, and there are other legal options that they can take. But really, it gets more complicated from there. So talking to a lawyer is the most instructive thing. These are some additional resources. So if you have questions, there's a lot more information on our website than what I shared today. But if you have a question that isn't answered on our website, these are some things you can do. If it's a question about a specific individual you're working with, a claimant, and it's specifically about their claim, they have a question, you and or they can call the IRB Refugee Protection Division. They've got something called a case officer line. There's numbers there. Usually you have to like leave a message and they'll call you back within 24 hours, but that can be really helpful. So those are the numbers, call it. You can email Katya at MapBC. Katya has a wealth of information, honestly. Highly recommend reaching out to her. She also knows everybody, so she could ask other people. You can access the BC Refugee Hub, specifically the toolkit, or other kind of resources there. Also, talk to a refugee lawyer if you know one, or an experienced settlement worker. Check the Safe Haven Service Directory and ask a colleague. These are some of my ideas. Oh, and one that's not on there that I wanted to mention is something called the Canada-US Border Rights Clinic. If you have questions about like the Safe Third Country Agreement or complications in clients that you see crossing the US border into Canada, they're really, that's what they're there for. So contact them. I can put that in the chat too. Oh yeah, this is my contact information. I've got well, you can email me, Sophia at kinbrace.ca, or you can email the general readytours at myrefugeeclaim.ca. But yeah, please do reach out to me. And before we go to questions, I just really quickly wanted to share my screen and just like give you a flyover tour of our website and point out some of the things that I think are like the most useful parts of the website. This is a landing page. So you can choose any of these languages. This is the main website. Here's, all the different sections, which you can also see if you click the menu button up here. Section 2 is really designed as basically we tried to include all the tips that settlement workers keep in their minds that we thought every refugee claimant should kind of have. So there's all these different tips about like how to organize yourself, how to prepare for your hearing, etc. So I like how you should, writing down your story and gathering evidence. So section 2 is really helpful. In section 3, this is all about getting a lawyer. And I find there's a really helpful in the section about 3.2, working with your representative. Your legal rep should do these things, your role as the client, and what your legal rep should not do. So what to do if you've got concerns about your legal rep. I was telling you about this section. So this is section 5.3 about all these legal issues. And there's like drop downs for all of these with explanation about the issue, and then examples of evidence that you could provide for like all of these things. So I always think this is like actually one of the most helpful parts of the website. And so I encourage you to look at that. There's a whole section about like who's going to be at your hearing and what are the order of events at your hearing. What's the difference, or how do you prepare for a virtual or an in-person hearing, things like that. There's a lengthy section about after your hearing. So this is like a really good resource if you have someone who's going through this, specifically about like what to do if your claim is rejected, how do refugee appeal division appeals work, etc., as well as like the other kind of options there. And then I didn't go through this today, but there's a whole section on immigration detention, which you should look through if you're ever dealing with that kind of thing. There's also a glossary section. There's a community resources section. If you are not on here and you want to be on here, let me know. But this is intended to be useful, and if you are working with someone who calls in from another province too, you could, look up things in other parts of the country. And there's also all the ways to contact the IRB, IRCC, and CBSA in the different regions. Things like that. Ready Tour. This is where you can find the orientation booklet. Okay, so that's just a little flyover tour.
Thank you, Sophia, for joining us, for your presentation, for answering all of our questions. Thanks to Kieran for providing us an intro to the BC Safe Haven Resource Network. Thank you to Con for your tech support in the background. And have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thank you.